The storm came like a warning the night they sent me to the mansion. Rain hammered the valley roads as my grandmother tied my shawl tight around my shoulders. "Go carefully, Amara," she whispered. "That house holds more than sickness." I was 23, a village nurse with steady hands and a quiet heart. I had delivered babies in huts and stitched wounds by candlelight. But nothing prepared me for Lord Bartholomew Kane. The villagers spoke his name like a curse. He had built his fortune crushing smaller men, buying land while families starved, turning gold into power. Now he lay dying in his mansion on the hill, and no one would tend him. Except me. The village healer had gripped my wrist that morning. "He speaks to no one," she said. "But if he calls, go fast." I didn't ask why. I only nodded. As I climbed the muddy path toward the iron gates, lightning split the sky. The mansion loomed ahead, dark and silent. I touched the crescent-shaped birthmark on my shoulder, a habit when I felt afraid. Then I knocked. A hunched housekeeper opened the door. Her eyes were tired, ancient. "You're the nurse," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. She led me through hallways lined with gold frames and marble floors. Everything gleamed, but the air felt heavy, suffocating. "He's upstairs," she muttered. "Third door. Don't touch anything he doesn't permit." My footsteps echoed. The mansion smelled of medicine and old wood. When I reached his room, I paused. The door was already open. Inside, a man lay in a massive bed, thin as paper, his chest rising slow and shallow. Machines beeped softly. Moonlight fell across his face, revealing deep wrinkles and hollow eyes. I stepped inside. His eyes snapped open. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Nia," he whispered, his voice breaking. I froze. "No, sir. My name is Amara." His face twisted in pain. He turned away, trembling. "Of course. Forgive me." I set my bag down gently. "I'm here to help you, Lord Kane." He laughed, bitter and dry. "No one can help me now." I checked his pulse. It was weak. His skin felt cold despite the fever burning in his eyes. As I adjusted his blanket, I noticed something on the nightstand. A photograph in a silver frame. The woman in it was young, beautiful, with kind eyes. She held a baby wrapped in cloth. I reached out without thinking. "Don't you dare touch what you don't understand," he snapped, his voice sharp as broken glass. I pulled my hand back. "I'm sorry." He closed his eyes, breathing hard. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then he whispered, "Her name was Nia." I said nothing. I only listened. "She was everything I wasn't," he continued. "Good. Pure. I destroyed her." His hand trembled as he reached for the photograph. He held it against his chest like it could save him. I didn't ask questions. I only cleaned his wounds and gave him water. But as I left that night, I heard him whisper again, "Nia, forgive me." The storm outside roared louder, and something inside me stirred. The next morning, I returned to the mansion. The housekeeper met me at the door. Her face was grim. "You heard him speak last night," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. She motioned for me to follow her into the kitchen. We sat at a wooden table, and she poured 2 cups of bitter tea. "That woman in the photograph," she began slowly. "Her name was Nia. She worked here 30 years ago. A maid. She was quiet, hard-working. And Lord Kane loved her." I blinked. "Loved her?" The housekeeper nodded. "But his family wouldn't allow it. She was poor, from the valley. They said she would ruin his name." She paused, staring into her cup. "When she became pregnant, they cast her out. Lord Kane did nothing to stop them." My chest tightened. "What happened to her?" "She died of fever in the valley," the housekeeper said quietly. "Alone. The baby disappeared. No one knows where." I felt cold. "And Lord Kane?" "He searched," she said. "But too late. Guilt has eaten him ever since." That night, Lord Kane woke screaming. I rushed to his side. His eyes were wild, unfocused. "Nia, please," he gasped. I didn't mean it. I was weak. Forgive me. I held his hand. I'm Amara, I said gently. You're safe. He blinked, his vision clearing. When he realized I wasn't a ghost, tears filled his eyes. I'm not afraid of death, he whispered. I'm afraid of being forgotten by the one I wronged. His voice cracked. I built an empire, but I destroyed the only thing that mattered. I felt something break inside me. This man had hurt people. He had been cruel. But now he was just a dying man drowning in regret. What do you want? I asked softly. He looked at me with desperate eyes. I want her to know I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. So I stayed. I held his hand until dawn. And when the sun rose, he finally slept. But I couldn't. Because his pain had become mine. 2 days later, Lord Cain gripped my wrist. His fingers were cold, trembling. Find her, he whispered. Find who? I asked, though I already knew. My daughter, he said. Nia's child. Tell her her father finally wept. I pulled back. I'm a nurse, not a messenger. Please, he begged. I have no one else. I looked at his face, hollowed by time and guilt. Part of me wanted to refuse. It wasn't my burden. But his tears fell onto my hand like rain. And I remembered my grandmother's words. Compassion doesn't ask if someone deserves it. It just gives. I took a breath. I'll try, I said. His eyes closed. Thank you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of my small room, wondering what I had promised. How could I find a child lost 30 years ago? But something deeper pulled me forward. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was foolishness. Either way, I had made a vow. And I would keep it. I visited the village seer the next morning. She lived in a hut at the edge of the forest, where smoke always rose and birds never sang. People said she could see what others couldn't. I found her sitting by a fire, stirring a pot. I've been waiting for you, Amara, she said without looking up. I sat across from her. I need your help. She finally turned. Her eyes were white, blind, but they seemed to pierce through me. You seek a lost child, she said. A child born of shame and buried in silence. I nodded. How do I find her? The seer handed me a torn, yellowed map. Every coin he spent buried a name, she said. To free him, you must dig through lies. I took the map, my hands shaking. Where do I start? She smiled faintly. The child you seek walks beside you. I frowned. What does that mean? But she only turned back to her fire. Go, Amara. The truth is closer than you think. I left confused, clutching the map. But I had no choice. The search had begun. I traveled to the nearest village, a place called Okairai. It was small, dusty, filled with farmers and traders. I asked about Nia. Some shook their heads. Others spat when they heard Lord Cain's name. One old man finally spoke. I knew her, he said. A kind woman. She worked at the big house before they threw her out like rubbish. Do you know what happened to her child? I asked. He shook his head. She left the valley. Never came back. I thanked him and moved on. Village after village, I heard the same story. Lord Cain had crushed people to build his empire. He had taken land, broken promises, left families hungry. Some cursed his name. Others mourned what he could have been. And slowly, I began to see the man behind the monster. He hadn't always been cruel. Once he had loved. Once he had dreamed. But fear and pride had twisted him. Now, all that remained was guilt. And a dying man's desperate hope for forgiveness. In a village called Emini, I met a widow. She lived alone in a crumbling hut, her hands gnarled from years of work. When I mentioned Lord Cain, her face darkened. That man took everything from us, she said. But then she reached into a tin box and pulled out a gold coin. It was stamped with Cain's crest. This came from Nia, she said quietly. She gave it to me before she died. Said it was payment for kindness. I held the coin, feeling its weight. What did she say? The widow's voice dropped. She whispered, He will look for us when it's too late. My chest tightened. Did she say anything about her child? The widow nodded slowly. She said the child carried the moon on her shoulder. I blinked. The moon. A birthmark, the widow explained. Shaped like a crescent. The mark of the Cain bloodline. My hand moved instinctively to my shoulder. Beneath my shawl, hidden from the world, was my own crescent-shaped mark. But I said nothing. Not yet. Back at the mansion, I found the mute stable boy in the courtyard. He was young, maybe 16, with gentle eyes. He never spoke, but he always watched. That evening, he approached me. He held out a folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was a drawing. The same woman from the photograph. Nia. I looked at him, surprised. You knew her? He nodded. Then he motioned for me to follow. We walked through the garden to the cellar door. He pushed it open and pointed inside. I descended the stairs, my heart pounding. At the bottom, hidden behind old furniture, were boxes. I opened one. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to, my dearest Nia. I picked one up and read. I am a coward. I let them take you. I let them destroy us. But I will find you. I swear it. My hands trembled. Lord Cain had tried. He had written. He had searched. But pride had stopped him from knocking on her door when he finally found her. And so she died alone. I closed the letter and wept. That night, I read one of the letters aloud to Lord Cain as he slept. My voice was soft, broken. I found you, I read. But I couldn't face you. I stood outside your door and heard you coughing. I knew you were dying. But shame held me back. I walked away. And now I will carry that choice to my grave. Lord Cain's lips trembled. His eyes fluttered open. I was a coward, he whispered. I set the letter down. You tried. Not hard enough, he said, his voice thick with pain. I let pride kill love. I sat beside him. Then help me find your daughter. Let her know the truth. He gripped my hand weakly. Promise me you won't stop. I promise, I said. And I meant it. Because now, this wasn't just his story. It was mine too. Even if I didn't fully understand why yet. The torn map led me to the Whispering Woods, a place where wind moved through trees like voices. I walked carefully, my shawl pulled tight. An old man sat by a fire at the edge of the forest. You're looking for Nia's child, he said before I even spoke. I nodded. How did you know? He smiled faintly. The woods whisper. They told me you were coming. I sat across from him. Do you know where she is? He poked the fire with a stick. The child survived. A midwife took her in. A woman who lived by the river. Where is this midwife now? I asked. Still there, he said. But old. Blind. She remembers everything, though. Go before the rains come. I thanked him and left quickly. My heart pounded as I walked toward the river. I didn't know why, but something inside me knew. The truth was close. Closer than I wanted to believe. And it terrified me. I found the midwife's hut by the river. It was small, built of clay and straw. Smoke rose from a hole in the roof. I knocked. Come in, child, a voice called. Inside, an old woman sat on a mat. Her eyes were clouded white, but she turned toward me as if she could see. You're searching for the lost girl, she said. I swallowed. Yes. She nodded slowly. I took her in when she was only days old. Her mother died whispering her name. What was her name? I asked. Amara, the midwife said. My breath stopped. The old woman continued. She had a birthmark on her shoulder, shaped like a crescent moon, the moon of the Cain bloodline. My hands shook. Where is she now? The midwife smiled sadly. She grew up kind, strong. She became a healer, just like her mother wanted. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced. What happened to her? She's standing in front of me, the midwife said softly. I staggered back. No. I ran from the hut, my chest heaving. The river rushed beside me, loud and wild. I tore off my shawl and stared at my reflection in the water. Then I looked at my shoulder. The crescent-shaped birthmark gleamed in the fading light. The mark I'd had my entire life. The mark I never questioned. My knees buckled. I sank to the ground. I was the lost daughter. The man who sent me to care for the dying lord had unknowingly sent me to my own father. The man I pitied was the man who abandoned me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I couldn't move. Because now everything made sense. The way he looked at me. The way he whispered Nia's name. He didn't see a nurse. He saw her. My mother. And I hated him. I hated him for leaving her. For letting her die alone. For making me grow up without knowing who I was. But beneath the hate, something else stirred. Something I didn't want to feel. Grief. For him. For her. For us. I didn't return to the mansion for 3 days. I stayed by the river, staring at the water, trying to decide. Should I tell him? Should I let him die without knowing? The seer's words haunted me. The child you seek walks beside you. She knew. Maybe she had always known. On the 3rd night, my grandmother found me. She sat beside me without speaking. Finally, I broke. "I'm his daughter," I whispered. She nodded. "I know." I looked at her, shocked. "You knew." "I suspected," she said gently. "But I wanted you to find out yourself." Tears streamed down my face. "What do I do?" She held my hand. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Amara. It means freeing both souls." I looked at the moon reflected in the river. My mother had loved him once. And he had loved her. That love had made me. Could I deny that? Could I let him die in darkness? I stood slowly. "I have to go back." When I returned to the mansion, the housekeeper gasped. "He's been calling for you," she said. "He's worse." I ran upstairs. Lord Kane lay gasping, his face pale. "Amara," he whispered. I took his hand. "I'm here." "Did you find her?" he asked desperately. I couldn't speak. My throat closed. He squeezed my hand weakly. "Please, tell me you found her." I looked at his face. At the guilt carved into every line. At the tears that never stopped. And I made a choice. "Not yet," I lied. "But I'm close." He smiled faintly. "Thank you." That night, I stayed beside him. I wiped his forehead. I gave him water. And I listened as he spoke about my mother. "She was the only good thing I ever knew," he said. "And I destroyed her." I wanted to tell him. But fear held me back. What if he rejected me? What if knowing made it worse? So I stayed silent. And the secret burned inside me like fire. That night, a storm came. Thunder shook the mansion. Lightning split the sky. Lord Kane collapsed, gasping for air. I held him up, calling for help. His eyes rolled back. "Nia," he gasped. "Forgive me." "I'm here," I whispered without thinking. He gripped my arm, his strength fading. "Tell her," he begged. "Tell her I loved her mother. Tell her I never stopped." Tears streamed down my face. "She knows," I said. "She knows." His eyes focused on me for a moment. "You promise?" "I promise," I sobbed. He smiled faintly. Then his grip loosened. The machines beeped faster. I pressed my hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat slow. "Please," I whispered. "Don't leave yet." But death doesn't wait. And neither does truth. I knew I had to tell him. Before it was too late. Before I lost the chance forever. The housekeeper found me weeping in the hallway. She sat beside me, her old hands gentle. "You know, don't you?" she whispered. I looked at her, my face wet with tears. "You knew all along." She nodded. "I suspected when I saw your birthmark the first day. The crescent moon. Just like Nia's." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because some truths must be discovered, not told," she said. "Did he know?" I asked. She shook her head. "He searched for years. He left fortune in trust for the lost daughter. But he never found you. She paused. He was cruel, yes. But guilt eats even the cruel. He became a different man after she died. A broken one. I wiped my eyes. What do I do? You forgive, she said simply. Not for him. For yourself. I stood slowly. My legs shook. But I knew what I had to do. I had to tell him. Before the dawn came. Before it was too late. I stood by the window, staring at my reflection. I saw my mother's eyes. Her gentle face. I had hated this man for so long without even knowing he was my father. But hate was exhausting. And I was tired. I thought about my mother. About how she died whispering his name. She had forgiven him. Even as she lay dying, alone and broken, she forgave. Could I do less? I touched the crescent mark on my shoulder. This mark connected me to him. To her. To a love that had been destroyed but never forgotten. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant freeing both souls. And I wanted to be free. I wanted him to be free. I turned from the window and walked back to his room. My hands trembled. My heart pounded. But I was ready. Ready to give him the one thing money couldn't buy. Peace. I sat beside him. He was barely breathing now, his chest rising slow and shallow. Lord Cain, I whispered. His eyes fluttered open. Amara, he breathed. I need you to hold my hand, he said weakly. Until dawn. Will you stay? I'll stay, I promised. He smiled faintly. If she ever finds me, he whispered, tell her I saw her in my dreams. Standing in light. Tell her I'm sorry. My throat tightened. She's closer than you think. He didn't hear me. His eyes closed. I held his hand tighter. The night stretched long and dark. Outside, the storm calmed. The wind stopped howling. And in the silence, I made my decision. When dawn came, I would tell him. I would give him the truth he had searched for all his life. The truth that would finally let him rest. I closed my eyes and prayed for courage. For strength. For forgiveness. And I waited for the light. The first ray of sunlight broke through the window. It fell across his face, soft and golden. His eyes opened slowly. Amara, he whispered. I took a deep breath. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break. You asked me to find your daughter, I said quietly. He nodded weakly. I pulled down my shawl. I turned my shoulder toward the light. The crescent-shaped birthmark gleamed. You have found her, I whispered. His eyes widened. For a moment, he didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then tears spilled down his face. No, he gasped. It can't be. It is, I said, my voice breaking. He reached out with trembling fingers and touched the mark. Nia's moon, he whispered. You're real. You're here. I nodded, tears streaming. I'm here. He pulled me close, sobbing. Forgive me, he begged. Please forgive me. I held him tight. I forgive you, I whispered. I forgive you. And in that moment, something lifted. The weight of 30 years. The guilt. The shame. The pain. It all lifted. And he smiled. For the first time, he smiled. Then I can die in peace. He passed an hour later. His hand was still in mine. The wind outside calmed completely. The machines stopped beeping. The housekeeper entered quietly and covered him with a white sheet. I sat there, numb. The gold locket around his neck had fallen open. Inside was a lock of hair. Dark and soft. Identical to mine. I took it gently and held it to my chest. He loved you, the housekeeper said softly. In his own broken way, he loved you. I nodded, unable to speak. She placed a hand on my shoulder. You gave him peace, Amara. That's more than gold. More than empires. I looked at his still face. He looked younger now. The guilt had left him. He was finally free. And so was I. I stood slowly and walked to the window. The sun was rising over the valley. A new day. A new beginning. I whispered a prayer for him. For my mother. For us all. The will was read 3 days later. I sat in the grand hall, surrounded by lawyers and distant relatives I'd never met. They stared at me with suspicion. The lawyer cleared his throat. Lord Bartholomew Kane leaves his entire estate to the daughter of the valley. To Amara. His only child. The room erupted. People shouted. Some cursed. Others wept. But I felt nothing. The gold didn't matter. The mansion didn't matter. What mattered was the truth. I had found my father. I had forgiven him. And he had died knowing he was loved. The lawyer handed me a sealed letter. He wrote this before he passed. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside, in his trembling handwriting, were his final words. Amara, I failed your mother. But you gave me something I didn't deserve. Forgiveness. Use this fortune not for yourself, but for those I hurt. Rebuild what I destroyed. And know that in my final breath, I was grateful. I was proud. I was finally free. Your father. I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. Then I stood and left the hall. I didn't need their gold. I needed air. I needed the river. I needed peace. I walked to the river where my mother had once rested. I dug a small hole beneath the old tree and buried the locket. As I patted the earth, a white butterfly landed on my palm. It stayed for a moment, wings glowing in the sunlight. Then it flew away. I watched it disappear into the sky. A symbol of forgiveness. Of rebirth. Of love that never dies. I stayed there for hours, listening to the river. Remembering my mother. Thanking my father. Letting go of the past. When I finally stood, I felt lighter. The burden I'd carried all my life had lifted. I was no longer the girl without a name. I was Amara, daughter of Nia, daughter of Bartholomew Kane. And I was free. I walked back through the valley, greeting villagers. Some smiled. Others bowed. But I was still just a nurse. Still just a girl from the valley. And that was enough. Because I had learned something greater than wealth. I had learned that forgiveness is the greatest gift we can give. Not to others, but to ourselves. Years passed. I used the fortune to rebuild the villages my father had destroyed. I built schools. I fed the hungry. I healed the sick. People no longer cursed the name Kane. They blessed it. Children grew up hearing the story. The story of the nurse who healed a man's soul. The story of a father who found his daughter at the edge of death. The story of forgiveness. Now I sit on the same hill where the mansion once stood. I tore it down and built a hospital in its place. The valley is green again. Alive again. I am older now. My hair has streaks of gray. But my heart is light. Because I gave an 80-year-old billionaire the one thing money couldn't buy. Peace. Forgiveness. Love. And in doing so, I found it for myself. The butterfly still visits sometimes. White and glowing. I like to think it's them. My mother and father. Together at last. Free at last. And I smile. Because their story didn't end in darkness. It ended in light.